What's up guys, welcome to React.js crash course. Now this crash course is specially dedicated towards beginners, but even if you are an intermediate developer, then this might be a great refresher for you. Okay, although in this course we won't be covering all the things, especially state management and context API or React hooks. We won't be covering those things, but we'll be doing a lot of basic React stuffs, so it might help you get started along the way if you're just a beginner. And in this entire course we're actually going to be creating a small application, and while creating that application we'll actually get a hang of all the important React concepts. Alright, so let's get started. So what is React? Now you might have heard this definition from your React documentation or anywhere else, that React is a JavaScript library which is used to build user interfaces. Alright, and that's true. Okay, this is actually a user interface where the user can interact with the browser, and I always think of React as a framework, alright, because it really makes things easier, in order to, and that's why frameworks are built, in order to make things easier for us, right? So the number one reason why we use React is because for large application, doing that with the help of just vanilla JavaScript is really difficult, if not impossible. So that's where React comes in. Alright, and with the help of components, React actually helps us in order to build larger applications. Okay, so if you can see this here, let me just create John here, and john@gmail.com. if I press enter. Alright, so if you see this here, this is actually an application, right? With the help of React, you can actually break down this application into smaller sections. Okay, so this right here, this navbar can be one component, this input can be one component, and this displaying section can be one component. All right, and each component we can work on different files, and finally we can merge that component in order to build a single application. All right, and this is how React makes things simple. Okay, consider if this were a larger application. All right, it would be really difficult for us to build that in a single JavaScript file. Dividing into smaller sections called components is much more easier in order to create those bigger applications. All right, and that's why React is very useful, and React is very popular these days. Another thing why React is very useful is because of this state, or you might say data. Handling the state is very much difficult in normal JavaScript. Okay, because when you actually changing the state, you also have to change certain elements, and again, if this were a bigger application, then with the help of just JavaScript, it would be really difficult. However, again, with the help of components, React makes things simple, and it's much easier in React to do this sort of stuffs. And another thing is it's very fast. Okay, so it provides a better user experience. If I delete this, you'll see that it gets deleted right away without being able to refresh. So without the browser being able to refresh itself, it's actually being deleted from here, and also it's actually being created. So yeah, that's the basic thing about React in short. So it's all about components. Okay, so we're going to be playing with components a lot, and we're actually going to be creating this application throughout the course. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright guys, so let's get started by first creating our React environment. Okay, so first let me just create a folder here in our desktop, and let that folder name be, let's say, react-app. Okay, and this will be the folder where we'll be actually creating a React application. So let's open this up. Let's open this folder in our code editor, and let's go to file here, let's go to open folder, and yeah, this React app, it's actually in my desktop, so let's select that folder. Alright, now the reason why I'm using VS Code is also because of the inbuilt terminal that it gives. So let's go to new terminal, And in order to create our React environment, There are actually a lot of ways in which you can do that, but I think the most simplest and the easiest ways is by using a package called create react app. Okay, and that's what I'm going to be using in this video. So but first, let's just check if Node.js is actually installed in our system, because unless and until you do that, you won't be actually able to install create react app, because you won't have the access to use npx or npm. So let's check if our Node.js is installed in our system. So in order to do that, you should type node-v, and if you enter, there you go, it's saying version 12.14.1 is actually installed in our system. So that's great. And now, in order to install our create react app package, all we have to do is write npx create react app. And now if you want to create a separate folder, you can actually do my application. And what this does is, we are actually inside our react app folder that we had created. Okay, so inside that, what it will do is create this folder called my application, and inside my application it will actually install or set up all the environment, react environment. Okay, but I don't want to do that. I just want to create my environment here inside react app. So all you have to do is, for that, you just write a dot and press enter, and the react environment will be created here. Okay, wow, so it really did take a lot of time in order to install all these files, but this is actually our React application right now, and all the files are installed here, and the environment is actually set up. So let's see actually what this application is actually displaying. All right, and then I'll talk about all these files here. So in order to see or test our React application, what you can do is say npm start. Okay, and this actually gives us a server where we can see our React application. So let's do that. And one good thing about this development server is that if we make any change in our React code, then we don't actually have to refresh the browser. We don't even have to refresh the browser. It will automatically refresh and it will display all the changes. All right, so this is actually our React application that it looks right now, and it comes by default whenever we install create react app package. And this is actually the server where this application is running. All right, and yeah, so this is actually what is displaying right now. Now let's talk about all the files that are present here right now. Okay, so first let's go to node modules here, and basically these all are packages or pre-written codes which you can actually use in your application. All right, now we're not going to use all and every one of these packages. The most important right here for us is this React and React DOM. Okay, and these two are the packages we'll be using in this video. Okay, and you'll actually be seeing import React from React and import React from React DOM. Import React from React, or import React DOM from React DOM. And later on, if you wonder where this React and React DOM came from, it's actually coming from here. Okay, React and React DOM. So for now, just remember that. What's this? So let's close this, and this is actually our public folder, and the most important file in this folder right now is index.html, and this is actually what is being loaded here. Okay, index.html is actually the file that the browser loads. Okay, so here all the all the links that you want to add, all the if you want to add any bootstrap CDN or something like that, you can add it here. All right, I do want to change this title here to something like email manager, because that's what we're gonna be building in this video. So as you can see, and the email manager is also changed here. All right, so that's our index.html, and the most important element that we need to know is this. Okay, div id equals to root, and whatever React components that we create, remember that React is all about components. So whatever component, all the React stuffs that we create, okay, everything is actually added inside this div. Okay, it's not like we are going to create React application here in index.html file. We'll be doing that in our JavaScript file, but in the end, all of those components will actually be adding right here. All right, so just remember that for now. And basically that's it for our index.html. Okay, you don't need to do anything here. The one folder which is the most important for us is the source folder. Okay, and this is where all our React happens. So first let's go to index.js here, and this is our main JavaScript file. Okay, and here in this file what you're actually doing is, remember I said earlier that all our React stuff we are actually injecting in that we're actually all adding inside this root element or this div element. Like, if you're wondering how that happens, it actually happens by this statement right here. What it actually does is just adds that component inside the root element of index.html. all right, so you might be saying, what is this? This is a component. Okay, the entire right here, what you can see right now, this is actually this app component. Okay, it's actually being imported from here. So this entire thing from let's say from here to here, this is actually being displayed here. So if I change something like this, if I do, if there's p here, if I instead of p, if I write hello world and save it, and as you can see, it automatically reloads. Okay, and this hello world is created right here. Okay, so basically what or how this is working is that we are actually creating a component here, and this is, by the way, it's actually a component. All right, so and we are exporting it like this, and on index.js we are importing that component, and what we're doing, we're actually adding inside the root element, okay, of index.html. That is the reason why we use React DOM, okay, in order to add anything inside the root element. Okay, instead of this app here, you can also add something like this. Let's say h1, and you can say h1, say hello world, and if you save this, if you save this, what will happen is that this h1 tag, this hello world, will actually be added inside your this root element. Okay, so let's try and check that out. Let's save this. There you go. Actually, you're actually seeing a hello world here. Okay, and instead of this JSX, you can also add components. Okay, so app dash. All right, so that's about React DOM.render. Okay, and that's why we actually use React DOM, okay, in order to add this component or add any element inside the root element. Okay, so that's basically it. That's actually been happening. That is actually what is happening in our application. We're creating a component, we're actually importing it, and we're actually adding it inside the root element. Okay, here if you kind of inspect this, and inside this root element you can actually see our app element. Okay, so div class app. Okay, so this is actually being added inside the root element. So that's basically about the setup and basically how our environment or our application is working right now. Now it's time to do some cleanup, because there are a lot of files which you really don't require, and it might be too overwhelming if I add anything else in addition to these files. So let me just remove the things that I really don't require. So favicon.ico is this, I won't require. And manifesto.json, this is actually the file which gives information to the browser about your application. Okay, this robots.txt files, especially it actually tells robots of the search engines, which are web crawlers, which pages information they should take and which pages information they should not. All right, and these two are not that important, but still I'm gonna keep it right here. All right, and from source I'm gonna delete everything except for index.js and app.js. Okay, so let's do that. All right, although we'll get this compilation error, okay, failed to compile, that's because we actually imported the service worker here. Remove that. And we've also imported index.css. Remove that. All right, and from app.js we're going to remove app.css here, and also the logo svg. And let's see, so logo is not defined, and let me also remove everything from here. And here let me just write h1 and say hello world and save that. All right, there we go. I hope you understood the basic file structure. Okay, so this is our hello world, this is our component, and it's being imported here, right? And with the help of React DOM.render, it is actually being placed inside this root element. All right, simple as that. That's our application right now, and this is our main component. Okay, now any other component, like in React, again, React is all about components, and you'll be seeing more than one component. Okay, and we in this course also will be creating more than one component, and all the component that we create, we'll actually import those components here in app.js, and we'll actually add that components here. All right, okay, so let's talk about components. Okay, the basic thing, or basic building blocks of React application. So yeah, components can be of two types. All right, and one is functional component and one is a class-based component. Okay, class-based component actually looks like this. So we have a class app which extends react dot component. All right, and what it has, it actually has a render method. Okay, and that method actually returns the content of the components. All right, so there could be something like this, again something like this, and say hello world. All right, so this is actually a class-based component, and this right here is actually a functional based component. And actually the work they do is the same. They actually create component. All right, and one major difference is that class-based component allows the use of state. Okay, and basically state is a data, but you can't use state in functional based components. Okay, that's not happening. And that is actually the main difference, is because when your component actually needs a state, then you use a class-based component. If your component does not use a state, then always use a functional based component. All right, so here this is actually our main component, and we'll actually be creating state here. So we'll be using class-based component, and it's saying, oh, actually it's return, right? Yeah, so we'll be using state here, and that's why we'll be using a class-based component. Okay, here instead of hello world, I want to write manage your email. Save that. All right, that's manage your email. All right, now before moving on further, or before doing anything, I just want to talk about this import React from React. Okay, because right now we know that why we are importing React DOM from React DOM, right? Because in order to create this app component inside the root element of HTML, right? But the reason why we're using React from React is actually turning this into HTML elements. Okay, this right here, this looks like HTML, but this is not HTML, it's JSX. All right, and although it's 99% HTML, but but there are some things that we'll see later on which are not common to HTML. Okay, so this is actually JSX, and in order to convert into HTML we use React from React. Okay, behind the back, right now you are not actually seeing the use of React here, but behind the back what is actually happening is something like this: react dot create element. Okay, something like that. Oh, sorry, something like this. And this react dot create element is actually turning this JSX into normal HTML. All right, and that's why whenever you add any JSX here, you always have to import React from React, because if you don't import React from React, this won't work. Alright, so that's that. And here we are actually extending react.component. That's because it will let you use props. Okay, props I'll talk about later, but let's say that there is another component, okay, and it has some data. That component actually has data, and if you want to use that data in this component right here, then you do that with the help of props. And if you don't extend react.component, then you'll not be able to use the data of other components inside this component. Yeah, so that's basically it about React and react.component. The next thing I'm going to show you is something like this. Okay, let's say I want to add a p tag here and say my email list, something like that. And let's just save it and see, and you will get an error. Okay, and it'll say adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag, which means that this render method actually returns a single element. Okay, it does not return two adjacent elements. So in order to solve that error, all you have to do is add a div and also close it here. Let's move here and save that, and now this will work. Okay, because this is actually returning a single element, this div element, and inside this div element you have two adjacent elements. Okay, so that's how you do it. Next thing I want to talk about JSX is that when you're adding a class, normally in HTML we use something like this, right? We use a class attribute and we actually start writing our class. However, in JSX you have to use what is known as class name. All right, that's how you actually add classes in JSX. And let's add a class here called text center. All right, and save that. And nothing will happen because we actually haven't created any CSS for this. Okay, so now I'll actually show you how you can add CSS. Okay, now in order to add CSS, you actually have to create CSS in a separate file. Okay, so let's do that. New file, let's say app.css. all right, and here what you can do is actually style this text center. So dot text center, and let's do text align property and align it to center. All right, and if you save this, still it doesn't work, and that's because we actually haven't imported this app.css. So let's do that. Let's import it here, import, and here you actually have to specify the path where app.css is, since it's actually in the same folder as that of app.js. So you write / and app.css. if you save that, and there you go, our CSS is actually working. Okay, so that's actually you add a CSS in your React components. But since this is not a CSS tutorial, I won't be adding that. Instead, I will be using Bootstrap if I want to do any styling. So let's keep it as it is, and let's also delete this. I just wanted to show you how you could add CSS files in React. So that's that. And now I actually want to create another component. Okay, and I actually want a navbar here. Okay, and I want that navbar to be a component, and I want to import that component here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's in source folder here, let's create a folder called components, And inside these components, let's create a new file and say navbar.js. All right. So let's start to create our new component. So first things first, we gotta import React from React. All right. And we don't need to import React DOM because we are not actually directly adding this component inside the root element. Okay, we'll actually be exporting this component and importing it here. That's why we are not using React DOM. And in this component also, we are not using React DOM. That's because we are exporting it and importing it on index.js. All right, so this is actually one of a good example where you can actually use a functional component instead of a class-based component, because this is going to be a simple navbar and it won't have any state. So let's just create a functional component. Now functional component is basically a function. All right, so function navbar, and it actually takes props as a parameter. Okay, and if any other component, let's say app.js, is adding some values to navbar, then this navbar can accept that value with the help of this argument. Okay, but right now we are not accepting values, so you can actually leave that as it is. Later on we'll move on to how you can get the values with the help of props, but for now let's just create a function navbar, and this function actually returns the JSX. Right, so here let me create a div first. So div, and inside that let me just create a navbar header saying h2, saying let's say email manager, something like that. Okay, and we also have to export this file, export this component. So export default navbar, and this will actually export the component, because unless and until, what's happening? Oh, sorry, default FAULT, right? Because unless and until we export this component, we won't be able to import it here. Okay, so that's that, and let's import the navbar here. So import navbar from, and here we actually need to specify where the location of this navbar.js. So since we're on the app.js, let's write /, which means where we the folder where we actually are, which is the source folder, and we can go inside components, and inside the components we actually have navbar.js. all right, now you can actually use this component here. All right, so let's use that. So I want this component to be here, so let's say navbar dash. Okay, and whenever you're writing components, I haven't told you this about JSX, is that an element should always have a closing tag. Okay, and for elements which does not have a closing tag, for example br or input, we actually have to end that with a slash, front slash. All right, and same goes for components. It does not have a closing tag, but we have to end it with a front slash. All right, so let's save it and see if this navbar component does display here. So let's do that, and there you go, it's actually displaying here, this stuff right here, and it's saying email manager. And that's actually how you import components and add components here. Okay, now I do want to style this navbar a little bit just to make it look good with the help of Bootstrap. So now if you want to use a custom CSS, feel free to do so, but I don't want this video to be a CSS tutorial, so I'm going to be using Bootstrap really quickly. Right here we're going to use CDN, so let's copy this link and let's go to index.html. So all your CDN and all those external links, you actually have to paste it in your index.html. all right, and I want that here. Let's paste it here, save that, and as you can see, the font is automatically being changed, which means that Bootstrap is actually working. All right, let's close that, go to navbar here. Let me quickly write classes for this. Alright, so nothing much, just a little bit of background, a little bit of padding, and I actually made this text go center and also made the color of this font white. Alright, so now let me just recap of what we learned. Okay, so we learned about components, and components are the basic building blocks of React, if I may say. And there are two types of components, a class-based and a functional-based component. We use class-based and actually both do the same thing, both actually create components, but we use class-based component whenever we want to use state or data. But if a component does not have something like that, we actually use a functional-based component. All right, and now I think this is a good time to introduce what is called state. As I said earlier, state is just a data, right? But it's more than that, okay? Depending on that state, your components will actually behave differently, right? And every component can have its own state, but a component can also use the state of other components, all right? That's very important to note down. Let's get started by creating our state. And in order to create a state, all you have to do is write state here equals to, and basically state is just an object, so create an object, and that's done. The state is actually created, and here you can actually add properties of the state. Okay, and properties meaning, just the data. So for example, if you write name here and set that to John, something like that, and if you also add email here, set that to John at gmail.com, something like that. All right, save that, and you can actually use this data here, right? And in order to add data or add JavaScript, you do that inside curly braces. So here let's write this dot state dot name, right? So we're actually calling this name here, so this refers to the class, and dot state refers to this, dot name refers to this. So let's see, let's save that, and there we go, we have manage your email John. All right, and you can, instead of that, you can also do email, because we also have an email, right? So and save that, and you'll see manage your email John at gmail.com. So this is actually, you add values inside your components. All right, and if you want to add any JavaScript, then you also do that within this curly braces. So for now, let me just remove this, and since in my email manager I will have more than one users, so instead of this, what I can actually do is create an array of users, and let's create an array, and here you can actually have, and this can actually be an array of objects. So create one object, inside it names name, say John, all right. This is how my state actually looks like. So it has a property called users, and this users is actually an array of objects, and each object has name and email. All right, let me just do this much so that you can actually see. All right, so let's see. Now I actually want the name and the email, all these things, to be displayed here. Okay, and I want all these three names to be displayed here, and also all this email to be displayed here. All right, Let me just change to Jane. And let me just change that to Josh. All right. I don't want all these three objects to be displayed here. So how we can do that? Okay, what we can do is actually loop through each of these objects, and for each of these objects we can actually display their name and their email. All right, so in React you can do that with the help of a map function. Okay, and basically map function is not React, it's basic JavaScript. All right, I think it was on ES5 or ES6. I don't know about that, but actually I have to check that out. But still, map function is not any new term that is actually introduced in React, but it's actually basic JavaScript. All right, so let's go here, and again, whenever you want to create any JavaScript, you do that within the curly braces. Okay, so you say, let's say this, let's call our users, right? So let's go down, let's say this dot state dot users dot map, and for every user that is inside users, meaning for every objects inside that array, what we're going to do is, let's say p, and we're actually gonna be paste the user dot name and also display user dot email. All right, let's save that, and there you go, john@gmail.com, jane at gmail.com, josh at gmail.com. So what we did was that we actually looped through all the elements of these users, and for each element we actually displayed user.name and user.email. Okay, their name and email. But now, instead of displaying name and email at the same time, I actually want to display a component. All right, so instead of this, let's create a component called email. All right, and let's import that component here. So import email from dot slash components slash email dot js. And since we haven't created our email component, let's create a component here. It's a new file, email.js, and inside that component let's just write import react from react, right? And let's say function, because this component won't have its own state, so let's write function. Oops, sorry about that. Let's write function, and actually didn't add the function name, so email. Right, and this function actually returns the component contents. So for now, let me just write h1 and say email displayed. All right, let's save that. Actually forgot to export it, so export default, let's say email, right? Okay, so that component is created. So what this email component is doing is just displaying email displayed, and that is actually being called here or imported here, and we're actually using that component here. Okay, so and since this map function will run 3 times because we had 3 objects, right? So this component will actually be created 3 times, and since this component has email displayed, so email displayed will be displayed 3 times, right? So let's save that, and you'll actually get to see, there you go, it's actually being displayed 3 times. All right, and I don't want to display email displayed, I actually want to display the name and the email. All right, and now is really a good time, to actually introduce props. I did talk about props a little bit earlier, right? But Now I can actually talk about in details. So in situations like this, you actually use a prop. Now what is a prop? It's just a fancy term, okay? But what we're actually doing is passing the values of state in this component. All right, and we are passing it as a prop. So a prop is actually an attribute, you might say. So let's just say name, and this is a prop, so equals, and here what we are passing is the state value, okay, and the value is actually present in user. So let's do user dot name. All right, I hope you're understanding. And let's say email equals to user dot email. There you go. So we are actually passing the name and the email. So for each object, for each user, we are actually passing the name, and we are also passing the email inside this component, okay? And from here, email, we can actually receive that component through this argument called props, and we can actually display those values by doing something like this, props dot name. And this name, we are using it because we had actually created here this name, right? That's why we are using that. If this would have been something like name something like that, then we have to actually use name. All right, so let's remove that. All right, so let's go here and say props.name. I also want to display props.email, so props.email, and that would actually display the name and the email. Let's save that. Let's save app.js and let's see. And there you go. John@john@gmail.com, jane@gmail.com, josh@gmail.com. So that's how you can actually pass a prop, and you can actually display on other components. All right, it's very simple. All right, so let's see. Now, one thing you should notice is that when you actually inspect here, and we're actually getting two errors. Let's see what error this is. Let's see. We're trying to use the following error while trying to use the following icon from manifest. Okay, so let's just go to manifesto.json here. Oh, you know, actually in manifest.json here we have, here it's written icons and favicon.ico. We actually deleted that in the first place, so let's just remove those right here, save that, and that error will be gone, I guess. Yeah, however, we are getting one error. It's saying that each child in a list should have a unique key prop. All right, so what this is expecting is whenever we pass a prop, okay, it'll also expect a unique key, or a unique key. Okay, so whenever we do something like this, whenever we loop through an array of datas, and whenever we pass it as a prop to other components, it will actually ask you for a key. All right, and if you don't actually provide the key, it will always throw an error. Although this will be displayed, but it will still throw the error. Okay, so in order to resolve that error, you can pass a key here. So, and that key should actually be unique. All right, so here let's just go and say id 1, and id should always be unique. Let's go here and say id 2, and let's go here and say id 3. All right, oops, actually just comma here, id 3. That's it. And here let me just write user.id, save that, and if you inspect it, go to console, now the error is gone. All right, so that's how you actually resolve that error. Anyways, now in here index.js, I just want to make this look a little bit better, so quickly I will just add a few bootstrap classes and restructure this. Alright, so nothing fancy here, just a container with the margin bottom of 3, and we also have a card just to give that little bit of border. And inside it we actually have created a name and made it a little bit bolder, and displayed our prop name and prop.email. Okay, actually want to also have a button here. Okay, so let me create that as well. So button class name equals btn sem btn secondary. Alright, and here let's just write button, and inside it let me just write delete. This delete will actually delete this entire component, okay, because right now this is also a component, this is also a component, and this is also a component. Okay, but I don't want to add the delete functionality for now, so let me just remove email.js from here. Alright, so now what I also want to do is actually add an input field here, so that I can actually type my name, type my email, and when I click on a submit button, that name and email will be actually displayed here. Alright, so let me do that. Alright, so nothing much, just a simple form, and it has an input for name, input for email, and also button to submit. Okay, now here let me talk about events. Okay, or I think events in React. So event handling is in React is similar to what you do in HTML. All right, so you don't use add event listener class, something like that, but in HTML you would actually do something like this. So on click, right, or on change, something like that. But here also you actually do the same thing, but instead of all small letters you actually use a camel case. So on change equals to, and then you can actually add a function here, okay, which will run when any change happens in the input field. All right, we can actually do something like this, dot change name. All right, and the reason why I'm writing this is because we are inside a class. All right, normally what we used to do was, like, when we used to set an attribute called on change, and we would do something like this, right? So a function name, and you'd do like this. But since we're inside a class, we gotta use this dot change name. Okay, and let me create this change name method here somewhere around, let's say, okay, let me create here, let's say method to run when the name input field changes, something like that. Yeah, let me just create that method, change name. All right, and this method actually also has an argument of event object, just like we do in normal JavaScript. And here we can actually do console.log and say e.target.value. all right, and let's just save that, inspect it. We're actually getting an invalid DOM property class. Did I write class? Oops, sorry about that. See, even I get confused a lot of times between class and class name. Anyways, all right, so let's write something here on name. Let's write G, and there you go, it's actually being console logged. So whatever we write, it's actually being displayed in the console. All right, which means that whenever any change happens inside the input field, this method is actually running, and what this method is actually doing is just console logging the value of this input. But what we want to do, instead of just console logging this value, what we want to do is actually store it somewhere. Okay, because whatever we will write here, let's say John, and let's say john@gmail.com. when we actually hit the submit button, I want the both of these values inside an object, and I want to add that object inside this array. Okay, so that should actually be the functionality. So whatever we type in here, I actually want to save it somewhere. Okay, and the best way where we can save it is actually here. Okay, so we already have a property called users. So what you're gonna do is create another property called name, and that name should be null right now, and also email, and that should also be null right now. So these two are actually gonna be our temporary variables or some temporary properties where we can actually store whatever we have written here. All right, let's go here and say this dot state dot name equals to e dot target dot value. Right, you might be thinking of something like this, and this is actually okay in normal JavaScript. Okay, this is actually valid, but you'll get some warnings. Okay, so first warning that you'll get is do not mutate the state directly. All right, and what that is, I'll talk about it later, but you'll also get an error first. All right, and it'll say cannot read property state of undefined. Okay, so state of undefined meaning this right now here is undefined. Okay, so in order to solve this, what you can do is change this into an arrow function. All right, so all you have to do is equals to, and just do this, and that error will actually be gone. Right, but the next thing is it's saying do not mutate the state directly, use set state. Okay, so which means that this state cannot be changed directly. We should not update it or change it directly. Instead, we actually have a set state function, and we should actually use that instead of directly changing the state. All right, so let's go here, and instead of this, let's write this dot set state. All right, and this dot state is actually a function, and inside that, let's open the parentheses, and here you actually have two values. The first value, and the two values are actually separated by a colon. So first value is from the state, what do you want to change? All right, so I want to change this name, so just write name, and on the second value you have to actually mention what do you want to change with. All right, so I want this name to be changed with e dot target dot value. All right, and that would do the trick. So if you save this, and I hope you have your React developer tools, and here if you let me just maximize this, and if you just go to app here, we can actually see our state, and if you type anything in the name here, let's say June, and you can see that the value inside the name is also changing. All right, it's taking a little bit of time, but it's actually changing. Yeah, the state is being changed, and we also have to do the same thing, and we also have to do the same thing for our email. Okay, so let's go to email down here. Let's say on change equals to, right now let's write this dot change email, something like that. And here let's just copy this because most of the code it's gonna look the same. Let's say method to run when the email input field changes. here let's just change name to change email, and this is gonna be the same, this dot state, and instead of name here what you can do is write email. All right, so again let's just check that. Let's inspect this. Let's go to components, app. You actually have email and name, so if I write name John, and you can see John here. Also if I write john@gmail.com, see john.gmail.com here. Okay, so like the state is instantly changing as we change our input field, and that's really awesome. So that's done. Okay, whatever we are typing here we're actually storing in this name and email property now. And the next thing that I want to do is when I hit this create, or when I submit this form, because this is actually a form, right? So when I submit this form, I want to store this to as an object. Okay, and I want to actually store it inside this users array. So let's do that. Let's create an event here called on submit. Okay, and submit, and this will actually run when the submit button is created, or sorry, submit button is clicked. So here let's add a function called this dot save email, something like that. Okay, so let's go here and create that method. Say method to run when the form is submitted. All right, so let's say, and the method that's gonna run will be save email. So let's define that method here. So save email equals e. All right, and what we're going to do is actually, and this is by the way arrow function. Okay, if you don't know what arrow function is, you might want to check that out, because you're going to be using a lot of ES6 features in React, and learning ES6 is actually a really good prerequisite, I may say. So anyways, so what we're going to do is create a variable. So let email be an object. All right, and in that object what I want to do is create a property called name, and the value of this name should be this dot state dot name. All right, and similarly for email, the value should be this dot state dot email. And this object is actually created, and the next thing I want to do is actually add this object inside this array of users. All right, so again we should not actually mutate the state directly. So what we're going to do is use set state. So this dot set state, and for curly braces, the first thing is again which state property do you want to change, and that will be of course the users. And what do you want to change with will actually be, here we're actually going to use something called spread operator. Okay, first I'm going to do I'm going to type, and then I'm going to explain it to you guys. But what you're going to do is create 3 dots. So what I'm going to actually do is say this dot state dot users, comma, and we're going to write email, right, and save that. So what this will do is, I hope you're understanding set state. So what you're doing is the user property that was there inside our state object, okay, that is actually being updated, and here we're actually writing what this users is going to be updated with. Okay, so this is actually a spread operator, and what it does is actually returns something. So let's see what it returns. So we actually have this dot state dot users, which actually is all these 3 objects, and along with that it will also return this email. Okay, so it'll actually return an array which consists of all the 3 objects that present that's present inside this .state.users, and along with that it will also return the object that is present inside the email. Okay, so now the returned array will actually have 4 objects, the 3 objects from here and the 1 object from here. All right, and that will actually be stored inside the users with the help of setState. So let's check that out. Okay, and after this is done, a component will actually be created here automatically. Okay, so let's try that out. Let's write Adam in email. Let's write adam@gmail.com, and let's click the submit button, and nothing is happening. Let's go to inspect. If John Josh. See Adam. Oh, the reason why it's actually being happening. Okay, this component is actually being created, but because whenever we write something here and something here, then if you create it, it's gonna refresh with browser. Okay, and that is actually the basic nature of the form. Okay, when you hit the submit button, the browser gets refreshed, but when the browser gets refreshed, actually the state data that was here also gets refreshed. Okay, so in order to prevent that, all we have to do is go here and say e.prevent default, and it will actually prevent the default behavior of the form, which is actually refreshing. So let's go here and write Adam @gmail.com, and actually save that, or actually hit the submit button, and again it's not displaying. Let's go to inspect. Actually have an error. It says each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Alright, so the reason actually it did not show up here, these two data did not show up here, is because although we had created the name, although we had created the email, we actually haven't created the ID. Now for ID, I could hardcode and write ID here, but I actually want to use a package called unique ID, and what it does, it just generates a unique ID for us so that we don't have to hardcode ID every time. Okay, because ID has to be unique. So let's stop the server here, just do Control-C, and here I actually want to install a package called unique ID. So in order to install that, let's just write npm install unique ID. Alright, let's press enter, and that's actually gonna get installed. Alright, so the package is installed, and in order to use that package, all we have to do is import here. So import unique ID from unique ID, and in order to use that, it's very simple. Just go here and say unique ID. Alright, let's save that, and let's run our server. So npm start, npm start. Alright, so let's test this out. So let's try that out. Okay, let's say Adam, and do adam@gmail.com. Let's create it. Go down here. There we go. It's created. Okay. Actually, we didn't also have to create this new component. Okay. All we did was added value to the state, and this component was automatically being created. That's because we actually have this code right here. Okay. This is actually doing all the stuff. And that is what I meant about state. Okay, although it is a data, but it is more than data. Okay, the components behave differently depending on the state. Okay, right now there was 3 components, and as soon as the state changed, the components right now here is 4. Okay, so that's what state does, and since everything happens so quickly, this makes a better user experience. So that's about creating. And I think we are actually being I think we are actually reaching the end of this crash course. But the last thing what I want to do is actually delete this. Okay, so let's go to index.js. Sorry, where was this? Was it email.js? All right, one thing to notice is that this button right here, okay, it's actually inside the email component, but our state, it is actually in our main component, that is the parent component. Okay, so if we want to actually change the state, we actually have to create a function here called something like a delete component or something like that. Okay, we can't create a function here and actually delete the state. All right, we actually have to create the function itself here in order to delete that. So when I click this button here, I want to actually initiate a function, or I actually want to initiate a method, and that method I actually want to define it here, and that method will actually kind of remove the required or the desired data or the desired component from the users. Okay, so, and we can do that with the help of props. Okay, so what you can do here right here, or sorry, let's close that up. And this is actually kind of difficult to understand at the beginning, but once you do a lot of React projects and once you get your hands dirty, then you'll actually find this very common. Okay, and you'll actually find this much easy later on. So let's call here an event called onClick, which will actually run when you click the delete button. All right, equals, and inside here let me create a method called, and this method, instead of writing this dot something like that, we're actually going to go write props dot delete component, and that's it. All right, and what we're going to do here is, and this is the component we're actually passing the props, right? So here what we're going to do is say delete component equals to, and here we're actually going to type down the method. Okay, that's going to run here in our app.js. So this dot delete. All right, and here let me go right here and say not function but method to delete the component, something like that. And here let's write delete. Let's first just console.log and say deleted. Okay, save that. Let's just also save email.js, and if I inspect here, let's go to console. Alright, so if I click here, and actually it's saying deleted. Okay, if I click here, again it says deleted. If I click here, again it says deleted. What's actually happening is that when I click or delete here, this onClick event runs and it calls props.delete component. Okay, and this delete component, we actually have passed it through here as a prop, and this actually has this dot delete method. Okay, and what this dot delete method is doing is it is console logging deleted. Okay, so that is how you can go one step above, all right, in React. So yeah, that's working. And one thing to notice here is that if you want to delete a component, all right, or if you want to delete the data, we actually need to know which data or which component should be deleted. Okay, because as of now we don't know here. Okay, we don't know which component or which object to delete from the state. All right, so for that you can actually pass an ID, because ID is unique, right? And every object or every component has different ID. So you can actually pass that ID. You can grab that ID here, and you can actually loop through all the users here and check the ID for each object. All right, and if the ID for a particular object matches, you can actually delete that. So let's go here. So since this is actually our button, we actually have to pass our data, which is ID, from here. Okay, so now in order to pass any data, you have to do what is called .bind, and here you have to actually have to pass the parameters. So the first parameter will always be this, followed by what you want to pass. Here I want to pass ID, but ID is not stored in this ID. It's actually stored in props.id. all right, so and in our app.js you can actually grab that ID here, ID, and if you console log just ID, which is this, save that. Let's also save email.js, and if you click here, and it's saying, okay, so the reason why we're getting undefined here is because we actually haven't passed the ID. So we can do something like this: ID equals to user.id. all right, and you can actually get that prop here, so props.id. now that will work. So let's check that out, and there you go, 2 1 3. all right, so now when you delete it, you actually get the ID of that component. Now what you can do is actually we can loop through all the users and check whether each object's ID is equal to this ID. Okay, if that's equals to this ID, then that object will be thrown away from that array. Alright, so in order to do that, we can actually use a filter function. Okay, so let new user equals to, can do this dot state, and by the way, this should actually be an arrow function. all right, this dot state dot users, and you can say dot filter, and here you can actually do something like this. So for each user, you can actually check that, and user dot id not equal to id. all right, so what this does is that it loops through all the users, okay, which is actually the array here. It will loop through all the elements inside that array, and for each element it will check whether the element's ID is equal to this ID. okay, and if the element's ID is not equal to this ID, then it will store a new user. okay, but if the element's ID is equal to ID, then it will not be added inside this new user. That means that the component which is to be deleted will not be added inside this new user variable. all right, we can actually change the state with this variable with the help of set state. So let's do that as well. So this dot set state, okay, and the state and the property that we want to change is users, and we want to change that with new user. Right, and that would do the trick. Let's save that up. Now let's try this. Okay, and let's do that. Delete, done, delete, done, delete. Okay, so the delete is working. all right, so let me summarize what we actually did. Okay, so we actually have this delete button here, right? So on click event means when we click this delete button, what it will do is it will call this delete component. Okay, props.delete component, and props.delete component, we actually have passed it from here. all right, and what this does is actually calls this dot delete and here on app.js. so this dot delete will get called, this will actually run, and this will actually require one argument. It will actually take one argument which is being passed from here, which is props.id, and what it does that for each users in the state, it checks whether that user ID is not equal to ID. If the user ID is not equal to ID, then it will actually add that entire object inside this new user. But if the user ID is equal to ID, then it will not add that object inside this new user, which means object to be deleted will not be added in the new user, and this new user is actually mutating the state, which means that this users that we had inside the state is being changed to new user. Okay, that means all the elements inside this users that was in the state is actually being changed to, where's that, new user. And that is the reason why when we click this delete button, this component actually gets deleted. And if you want to add something, let's say John, and here let's say john@gmail.com. If you create it, it gets created. If you delete it, it gets deleted. Alright guys, so I think that's it about the application. Well, we did cover a lot. Okay, so let's summarize what we actually learned from the start. Okay, so we learned what is a component, okay, and we learned what is a class-based component and what is a functional-based component. We learned how you can create a component. We talked about these two things, that is import React from React, import React from React DOM, what it does. We also talked about how you can add JSX or actually add a component or render a component in our HTML. We talked about state. We talked about how you can transfer state as a prop to another components. Alright, and we also talked about event handling and things like that. And we also talked about event handling and things like that. Okay, and yeah, we did cover up a lot. Since it's a crash course, I can't go very much into details on each and every topic because it's really gonna be long, but I really did my best in order to help you get started with React. And I don't know, you can actually really move on with this application, you know, try to add something inside it, or even make this input field in a single component, or do something similar to that, or you can actually create another application on your own. That would be really great. But yeah, for me, I think this is okay, and this is it for this video. So I hope you guys learned a lot from it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know whether you liked it or not, but please do comment down below, and that would really help me out. And do like, share, and subscribe to my channel. That really motivates me in order to build more of these courses and more of these videos. Okay, and if you want similar videos like this on, say, Angular or Vue, or I don't know, any other language, you can actually comment down below, and I'll be happy to make it for you. All right, so that's it guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.